G'day fans and welcome back to Bit of the Old DNA. Dags and Aaron once again talking about the old Book of Boba Fett and the episode that occurred last Wednesday, so you would have had plenty of time to watch it, get all the spoilers and stuff out of the way. Mr. Aaron, how are you going, old son?
I'm doing well. It's been a busy weekend. How about you?
Just plodding along, looking forward to a little bit of Boba Fett conversation. It's going to be absolutely fantastic. I love it. Old Christy's joined us here. And last week, Christy wasn't all that excited about the old Book of Boba Fett, but she's here with us anyway, which is the most important thing of all. So there you go. There's a lot to discuss in this episode, especially considering and looking, and James is looking forward to it, what the episode of Book of Boba Fett from last week or our episode. Hopefully it's our episode. So there you go. So the episode came out last Wednesday, so we've deliberately waited a few days before we've had this review, so people had a chance to watch it and absorb it, and probably watch all the other reviews and go, yeah, those guys don't know what they're talking about, sitting there hanging out for us. Mr. Aaron, in 3 words or less, your thoughts on the episode, sir?
I liked this one better.
Very, very cool. I like this one. It's almost 3 words. That's okay. That's very, very cool. All right. So there's a couple of things we're going to be discussing tonight regarding the episode itself. So it is the Tribes of Tatooine. And for those who aren't aware of our process here, of course, there will be spoilers. So if you haven't seen the episode, don't watch us. Go nick off now and check it out. Or if you don't care, then feel free to watch on. Now, before we get right into the guts of the episode, and we will be breaking it up into 2 bits. So the episode, as you know, is broken into 2 sections, the present and the past. And last week we did the past first, then the present. We're doing it in reverse order. So we're doing the present first and then the past. But before we do any of that stuff, we've got to cover off this little bit, which is what we call the banter in the room. This is actually quite significant regarding the story and the characterizations of Mr. Boba Fett himself, because quite simply, as I said there, as Yoda once said, you must unlearn what you have learned. And without getting into too much detail, Mr. Aaron, as you alluded to last week, and as we picked up on, the character of Mr. Boba Fett has changed significantly to how he was portrayed in the original trilogy. So we'll be discussing the scene later on where he has all the visions and all the rest of it. But what are your thoughts on the fact that he's now a completely different dude to how he once was?
I think it's probably jarring because they have set it directly after Return of the Jedi and you see him coming out of the sand, implying there hasn't been a lot of time that's passed. So you wouldn't maybe think that the character has changed as dramatically that he has. That said, I think by setting it in the past as well, when maybe they're going to explain why he has changed from the Boba Fett that we might have expected we were going to get. What did you think, Dags?
Yeah, I'll get to my thoughts in it later on as to what I thought. No, that's bad English. What I thought of it. But the crux of the matter is that they've really changed how the character is now being portrayed. And as some fans have said, if you cannot handle how he's being shown, so he's not the ruthless bounty hunter anymore, he's now a completely different person, don't watch the show. Get out of it now, because if you can't accept it, you won't like it. And as I said, like with the Yoda quote, we now have to completely readjust our thinking as to how the Boba Fett character is going forward. So he's not what he used to be any longer. And they've tried to sort of cover that off in this episode as to why it's all changed. And whether it be for better or for worse, as you said last week, it's just the way it is, and we just have to deal with it. So some people probably won't be able to cope, but if you can, the show is a lot more easier to watch and a lot more enjoyable. So that's where we're all at with that. So Gavin has said anyone would significantly change. Exactly right. Well, we'll cover what exactly happens to him later on in our episode, actually. Yeah, exactly right, Michael. Waking up on side of Sarlacc will change him, but we'll get further into that as well. And as Gavin said, yeah, spoil away. He doesn't care about spoilers. And Thomas has already nicked off because he realised he hasn't seen the episode yet. So there you go. So if you do have comments about the show, the episode, as in the actual TV episode, then by all means, bring them forward. Now, we don't want to spend too much time on the present side of things because ultimately the present is actually interesting, but the past stuff is actually more interesting. And we'll get through it as we plod along. So I like the idea of this. We've kicked it off straight after the end of the last episode. Fennec Shand has arrested the assassin dude, and they've come back to Jabba's palace. And that, of course, leads us straight into the whole thing. Now, we had said last week who sent the assassins. I said it was the mayor. As it turns out, the assassin says it's the mayor, but it wasn't the mayor. So, the Order of the Night Wind. What do you reckon all that's, old son?
Well, it's obviously going to be one of the, Crimson Dawn, Black Sun type of I guess, crime syndicates, I would guess. What were you thinking on that?
I don't know, and I think it must be an antagonist we haven't seen yet. So, I mean, so Fed has taken over the Jabba's palace, and almost the next day, assassins are chasing him down. Even though we saw the major domo for the mayor saying, "Oh, you're going to get visited again." So, assuming that when we see the mayor, he's telling the truth. Yeah, it's a bit of a bizarre one. So these guys have just been sent out of nowhere. So at the moment, it's a bit of a mystery. So we'll have to wait and see. But it was kind of funny. I thought, like at this stage, this is one of the weakest scenes of the show. You know, the guy says, "Oh, the droid says he's not going to talk. He's not going to talk," and then sure enough, they chuck him down the Rancor shaft, and he starts squealing like a pig, if you will. So, but it was good to see the old Rancor pit again. Even though Moochie could have been down there, this is not the actual original Rancor. This is another one from the Bad Batch, but it was all empty and quiet. And how did you find out? Were you sucked in? Because I certainly wasn't about the Rancor.
I was pretty sure like there wasn't going to be anything down there. The thing I find interesting, the guy crapped himself over like going up against the Rancor, but surely on an intergalactic scale, I thought Boba Fett had a bigger reputation than the Rancor would have.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. And I like this one from Bob. Nightwind, yeah, the Dutch oven. Yeah, good on you, Bob. That's well done, son. Unbelievable. So, yeah, so the guy gets chucked down the Rancor pit, you know, and this other Rancor is going to cheer you up. Obviously, this guy didn't do his homework before he arrived because he would have realised there's no Rancor down there. And, yeah, for those who are fans of Bad Batch, they'll go, whatever happened to good old Moochie? He was actually being purchased to end up at Jabba's palace. But, of course, that didn't happen. Who knows? So, there you go.
Probably from what we saw in The Mandalorian, Bib Fortuna ate him.
Well, it's a good point, actually. So, yeah, it's exactly right. Hoping for the Brainwalker Spider. That's the Boma monks, by the way, across the shot when they returned. Actually, I thought the same thing, but I believe the Boma monks are all killed off when Jabba took over. So the one you saw in Jedi might have been the last one. Maybe he was on his way out before he got plugged or something. I don't really know. So, yeah, you know, it's a nice little gag, but I thought here, had there been a reference to the Boma monks, because it's actually their temple that Jabba inhabits, but it wasn't to be. Yes. Gavin said he hasn't seen Bad Batch either. It's just the sub-story about how they try and get a small young Rancor to go back to Jabba's palace. It was very, very cute, but not the end of things, as it were. Here we go. Grant has said he's fresh out of Sarlacc and no back to Tank in the flashback. So why is he always going back to the Panker? Yeah, well, that's the thing. We don't know. So that was something we discussed last week. We're not entirely sure what the motivation is for that. We're just speculating at this point. Any thoughts that you want to add in before we move on?
No, just it was nice that the torture droid got a few more lines. It's always good when I think some of the classic characters turn up and add a little bit.
With that in mind, there'll be a couple more popping up very, very soon. So we go to Mos Espa, and there's Trandoshans or Trandoshans, if you will, to the left and the right. I thought that was just bizarre. So they're on one side of the street and the other side of the street. And I was trying to think of the song, you know, Trandoshans to the left, Trandoshans to the right, and here I am stuck in the middle with you. Yeah, these dudes.
Stuck in the middle with Bosk.
Yeah, exactly right. So, so these puppies are all over the place, which I thought was kind of groovy. And we're heading off to the Mos Espa City Council. Go and check out the mayor and see what the deal is with that. Now, that would have to be a hive of scum and villainy. So, this is the main street heading out to the main, I suppose it is the City Council, which I thought was actually well done. It looked good. It sounded good. What did you think of all that?
Yeah, I'm impressed. For a TV series, I can't see a discerning drop in quality in the location filming and things like this between the movie. It fits in perfectly with the look of the Star Wars universe, I think.
Yeah, I tend to agree with you. Once again, I think if they tried to do this show 20-something years ago, it probably would have really struggled, this and The Mandalorian. But the way that they're producing stuff now, because, you know, they're not green screening anything. They're using the volume thing, and they're obviously building sets here and everywhere. You can't tell what's fake and what's not. And I think that really does sell it. It's very, very impressive. Speaking of things getting sold, now I just said from this one still photo, right? I could have sworn Black and Blue that was Pedro Pascal playing the dude behind the counter. Now that's Din Djarin from The Mandalorian, and it's not him, right? It's another actor. But geez, I tell you what, only their mother can tell them apart. What do you reckon?
I thought this guy was funny because you know, when they do these scenes, they always put in sort of the alien of the week or something like this. And then you've got this guy turns up who looks like he's bored being on set, which I kind of thought was quite funny.
Yeah, some people suggest that it could have been a robot, a droid, you know, because they tend to be very, very fickle about these sort of things. But, you know, this dude, it was cute, but stupid at the same time because they don't have a booking to see the mayor and all the rest of it. I like this one from Gavin. The council must be doing well. Can't see any potholes. Yeah, exactly right. Well, you need to see some droids doing garbage collection and go, yep, that's where our money's going, which is kind of groovy. So I thought this is kind of interesting, right? So clearly this is the Mos Espa way. All the dudes walk into the council chambers. No one's checking weapons. Mate, it's a free-for-all. It's like the old Wild West, isn't it? It's like the bigger the gun, the more happier people are to see you. So, yeah, I mean, it's not important, but I thought it was neat to sort of see inside the council chambers. This is just a normal place. It's not like a cantina or anything fancy like that. It is just where normal people go. And maybe they've got their own version of what the unemployment office there or something. So, yeah, I thought that was quite interesting. What do you reckon?
Yeah, with what you're saying about the guns, it's one of those places where it's probably better when you can see people's guns rather than have the concealed ones. So maybe that's why everyone's at ease when, they will walk in with the guns and know who's pointing guns at who and what's doing what,
Yeah, exactly right. And you are right, James. Yes, the storylines are good, and the aliens do look good. I've got to say, they've actually done a really, really good job now, and most of them are actually quite convincing. You're right. Is that a pistol in your pocket? You're pleased to see me. When it comes to you, Gavin, I am always pleased to see you. What can I say? All right, so we finally get to meet the mayor, which is kind of groovy. And as we guessed correctly from last week, he was the Ithorian guy from the trailers, which was particularly groovy. So everybody's all gotten together, and this is where we find out the mayor did not send the Nightwind dude, and of course he just gets plugged right there on the spot. So yeah, it was an interesting play, and I like the idea that the Ithorian couldn't speak English. How do you use a translator, which was not a droid or some kind of a machine? I thought that was kind of groovy. And yeah, exactly right, James. It was a town hall meeting. So how'd you find all this? All pretty groovy?
Yeah, I did. I thought it was very cool because they did use the original speech plus the English translation over the top. My question is, why did the assassin say the mayor sent him?
Yeah, you do wonder, don't they? So much for being the feared thing. Although, as Fennec says, you're paying for the name, so maybe he was the runt of the litter, that particular assassin. So I don't really know. Speaking of names, though, the mayor does actually have a name now. Mox Shays, just another name to remember for trivia questions out there. And I thought that was actually quite good. I mean, it leaves the whole situation unresolved as to where the assassin came from, but the sequence itself seemed to work quite well. And then, of course, that he then sends these dudes off to the Sanctuary Cantina, which is where we catch up once with Faza. Gaza? Yeah, Gaza. I think a Gaza Strip, because as what you said last week, Gaza Strip. And she's obviously not the happiest camper in the world because the Hutts are coming. What do you reckon?
Yeah, I was wondering when I haven't gone into spoilers for this pre-watching the episode. So when she wasn't looking happy, I was wondering who would turn up. And when it was the Hutts, I was really impressed.
So speaking of people and things turning up, first things first, we get to see the whole band this time. And I just said as a joke, okay, let's just name the band. And I was just come up with Max Rebo on the Meteors. What do you reckon off the top of your head, old son? You're pretty good with jokes.
I don't know. I hadn't really thought about it. I guess anything with the blue elephant in there's. We've already used the banter in the room joke, so we can't really use the blue elephant in the room.
No, exactly. Yeah, exactly right. A couple of characters who did pop up. Now, these have not been confirmed by Wikipedia, so you can assume this is not the case. But I did find it interesting that dude there could have been Cabe from A New Hope, the cantina there. I mean, I'm just, plucking rabbits out of hats, but I thought I recognise that head, and it could have been that dude there, just like, oh, shit, hang on, too far. Hang on. That could have been Zutton from A New Hope as well. And I thought, well, the receding hairline, it kind of works. So I thought it was cute that they use these guys. What do you reckon?
I think it's really good. It's interesting to see the Cabe one because that was like a bat costume, and they changed it on the original Star Wars to look like an alien. And George Lucas went back through and took a lot of those out because they were from a production of the Nutcracker, and he just thought it was all a bit too crap to use a children's movie and redress them as aliens. And now they've gone and put it back in the new one. So I think that's a really nice nod to the original cantina scene.
Yeah, and as I've said once before, I do like it when there's a lot of historical stuff used in these shows rather than just focusing on the here and the now. Here we go. Max mixed up minions. There's a lot of M's in that. Max's mixed up minions. Blue elephants on parade. Yeah, very, very cool. And you're right, Margaret and Michael. It's still Dubbo. Yes, another Star Trek reference, which we all love. Now, speaking of really groovy things that had occurred in this show, the Hutts appear, the Hutt twins. And the first thing I liked of the fact is that these dudes who are carrying the dice, they are really struggling to support the weight. There'd be a few hundred kilos there for sure. But one of the big questions that came up is why did it take the Hutts so long to pop their noses in to find out why, like Jabba had been killed off? You got to remember, this is 5 years after the fact, right? This is about 5 years after Jedi. And someone had suggested maybe Bib Fortuna was filling in for Jabba well, after Jabba died. Once Bib had died, then these two decided to turn up. But what do you think? Because otherwise, it's just excellent timing on their behalf.
Well, I thought it was really good. It does make you wonder if they're expanding the territories of the Hutts to, Jabba's domain was Tatooine, and then you've got these ones turn up, and maybe Tatooine isn't as big in the picture of things as we thought it was, and it's more of just a little planet in the middle of nowhere that they control. I do wonder, like with the two of them, they're younger ones? I think they're a little bit smaller than Jabba the Hutt, but that'd be heavy. That'd be backbreaking work carrying around two Hutts, wouldn't it?
Yeah, that's why I like the fact that the dais actually bends in the middle, and you look at these
Yes.
dudes. Because in real life, you can imagine in real life, the actors are not carrying anybody. They're saying you're carrying two full-size Hutts on your back, and you go, oh my God, that's going to leave a mark. So that was
Well,
the
when you
theory
saw
being, huh?
So when you saw Gaza sort of looking out the door and implying that something was coming, and you heard the beating of the drums as they're walking in unison, I almost like get ready for make way for Prince Ali, and you have like the parade from Aladdin come round. It looked very similar to that.
Yeah, exactly right. Bob has said, I assume he's referring to the band here, the reboots. That kind of works for me. Michael has said about how the credits stopped coming in so much. It's possible, but it just seemed to happen very quickly. So remember, in terms of the timeline, Fett killed Bib Fortuna, and almost like overnight, he's plonked himself in as the head honcho, and then the Hutts turn up. So it must only be like a few days, if not a week. But it kind of worked for the story. So these big dudes turn up, and I did like the fact that he used. Now I don't know what the name of the creature was to sort of fan himself down at the big guy. that was really really funny. So, yes, I did notice that there was a point in the line mentioned that you apparently from Fennec Shan saying you need permission to kill a Hutt. And I thought, who do you ask for permission? It's like, what's the deal with that? So, what do you reckon?
Well, I was thinking, I guess the Hutts are being positioned as the crime bosses like the Corleones or something from The Godfather, and once they're made, no one can touch them. And also, I think in expanded universe, when the Galactic War was on, the Hutts kind of supplied both sides. They were hedging their bets, and they kind of made it so the rebels wouldn't go after them and the Empire wouldn't go after them. So you do wonder, who is that stopgap that stops them from getting, blasted? Is it gonna be the reveal, like a big name from the past, like that's who gives you permission to kill a Hutt kind of thing?
Yeah, as someone pointed out from a line from Phantom Menace, I think it was Panaka actually said that Tatooine was controlled by the Hutts, and he used the term in plural. And I thought that's interesting. So maybe they have a lot of sway over Tatooine. And as per the comment here, if you're a fan of the Clone Wars animated series, Rotter the Hutt, he would have been an adult by this point. No one ever knows what happened to him, unless Bib Fortuna ate him as well. So who knows? Maybe that explains why he's so large when we first saw him.
You need permission to eat a Hutt.
Yeah, exactly right. But I did like this sequence. I thought these two were really good, and the fact that we got subtitles from the male, but not from the female, I thought was really, really well done. You could argue the CG is not 100% completely photorealistic. Yeah, take that for what it is. But either way, their entrance was very, very grand, and I think they did really well with it. What are your thoughts, old son?
Yeah, I was like I discussed with you. I thought the CG was good, and you pointed out of course it's going to be better than the original. That was like 10, 15 years ago when they did the CG version of Jabba for special editions.
And then some. It was like over 25 years ago originally. I mean, last time we saw a CG Jabba was in Phantom Menace, and that was 23 years ago. So, so one of the things that fans love is when a character from an EU or just like out of some other format makes an appearance in the show, and fans went completely nuts over this, let alone trying to pronounce the bloody name. That's how he looks like on the left. Black Chrysanthemum, otherwise known as Santi, apparently, first appeared. And so he's obviously from the Darth Vader comic series. So he's a canon character, always was a canon character, but now he's actually appeared on screen. But yeah, once again, you got bloody names that you can't pronounce correctly. But that was actually when this dude popped up. He didn't do a lot, but when he was there, he certainly made a presence. What do you reckon?
Well, this is interesting because Wookiees have changed their appearance a bit. You've got the classic Chewbacca that everybody knows. And then when we saw the Wookiees in Solo, when they were rescuing them from the mines, they looked more like the creatures from 2001. And this is another version of the Wookiees as well. So I guess like humans, there's different sort of races on the same planet that look a bit different. Interestingly enough for me, they've just had the last series of Doctor Who. There was a creature that looked really like this in that as well. So I saw that turn up and I was like, oh, this is reminding me of Doctor Who.
So yeah, once again, we got this thing of names that you can't pronounce. Chrysanthemum. I just don't know why. I mean, why had the two R's? It's just Star Wars and stupid names kind of go hand in hand. And good old you for bringing up Doctor Who. You can always find a way to squeeze it in. Absolutely love it. Yeah, Christy said, yeah, Rotter and the Pizza the Hut. Yeah, I know. It's Yeah, there's just too many jokes there, isn't there, when you sit and think about it? Why not have the Gamorrean guards carrying those repulsive blobs of bloated flesh? Well, there's probably not many of them around. So that's a good question. Just getting normal dudes to carry them is the way to go. So, yeah, Gavin said, how close are Wookiees to apes? Probably not close at all. Maybe just physical. Just because something's ultra hairy doesn't necessarily mean they look like apes. Having said that, you've seen a lot of Italian guys at the beach when they get wet. They look pretty much like apes. So there you go. Oh, goodness gracious, man. What do you
Chad,
reckon?
who I worked with, I think was most excited because that Wookiees worked with Dr. Aphra, who's
Aphra, yeah.
popular
that's in the comic as well. Yeah. So Aphra is a canon character, but she obviously hasn't appeared as live action as yet. Christy said a play on Guru. So you know what? Somebody actually even said, the social keyboard warrior is going to get up in arms because his name is Black whatever. You know, you can't use the word black, white, and it's in this PC culturally insensitive time or sensitive time. And I thought, well, that's a good point. Someone might arc up and go, oh, you can't call him black. Anyway, we'll move on from that. And unfortunately, regarding the rest of the characterizations, Paul Fennec actually had even less to do this time around than in the first chapter. In the first chapter, she had a fight scene at least and got the rest of it. Aside from dragging this dude on a chain and standing there saying a couple of lines, didn't do a damn thing. So she's getting jibbed pretty badly. Did you see that yourself?
That was exactly the same thing as I was going to see, because the first episode I thought she was a little bit shortchanged, and this episode was even worse. I mean, for her character anyway, because I do think she is going to be a fan favorite, or is already a fan favorite. So anyone who's hanging out for her scenes has probably been a little bit disappointed with this episode.
Totally agree. So, yes, we'll have to wait and see. Hopefully at some point, because all the focus is on Fett, and because you've got the present timeline and the past timeline. And I think like the present timeline, as we discussed, is like 5 years after Return of the Jedi, which is when the end of the Mandalorian takes place. But the past timeline, and you have to readjust your thinking on this, is exactly the same time as Return of the Jedi. It's the same year, right? So after Fett busted out of the Sarlacc, as we said, let's assume it's been a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks. The whole Battle of the Death Star thing has probably just happened or is about to happen. And we have to sort of readjust our brains into thinking, okay, because like obviously Return of the Jedi was nearly 40 years ago. But in the timeline of the show, it's almost happening concurrently. And you have to readjust, as I said, how you interpret all that. So with this, just for simplicity, I've sort of rearranged the slides a little bit as to how they occurred in the show. But the coolest, or one of the coolest things that occurred, so we are now back in the past, this is the timeline of Return of the Jedi, is we get to see Toshi Station. That's that thing way in the distance, way back up there, when good old Boba Fett's doing a bit of a walk around at nighttime. And, of course, when you get Toshi Station, you bring back the old characters, good old Cammy and Fixer. What do you reckon of all that?
So that's one of those things that I guess unless you're a bit of a Star Wars nerd, you're not going to recognize them, because these were, of course, the characters that were at Toshi Station who were Wormy's friends.
Well, Wormy's Luke.
Yes, who were cut out of the original trilogy, because apparently when they first showed the cut of Star Wars to executives, they're like, what's all this stuff about space teens at the Toshi Station and talking about all this? We want to get to the action. So they went back and recut it. But it's a bit legendary because they've released the footage a while ago now, and it's interesting to see what could have been. And now they're back in canon. I think this is the first time they've really been shown on screen ever.
Yeah, this is only like 5 years? I think it's 4 years after A New Hope, right? So, but yeah, this is absolutely fantastic. So this is definitely fan service that has worked really, really well. And as you can see, they're even wearing the same clothes as what they're wearing in A New Hope, probably deliberately just to sort of make people have that link. Because when you get to this sequence and you see these two people, you go, well, they just stand out like big time. And you go, who are they? And then you realize, oh my God, of course, we're in Toshi Station, Cammy, Fixer. So all we're missing now is Deke and the other guy whose name I've forgotten. But yeah, I reckon that's kind of groovy. So yeah.
It's very interesting, isn't it? Because when you look at what they filmed for A New Hope, it was basically teasing Luke about being no one and a nobody. And 5 years later, they're still sitting in the same place doing the same thing. And he's seen the galaxy and basically saved everyone.
Yeah, imagine they get their like Tatooine bugle and they look in there and said, oh, Luke Skywalker blows up the Death Star. And you go, who would have guessed that? It's like, yeah, and you're right. These two have just exactly the same, but at least their relationship has lasted. So it was really, really good. It was a good moment, good bit of fan service. And I'm going to admit, all power to them for that one, which is particularly groovy. Gavin said, yeah, it's about time they got their spot. Yeah, exactly right. And the fact that they were wearing the same clothes was, as I said, quite intentional. Hang on. Ange said Ming can't be that complicated. She's probably filming both Boba Fett and Gremlins at the same time to see where she lands in the end. Well, exactly right. So hopefully we're all, I think a lot of people, if Fennec gets to have a really good episode or some character building of her own, I think everybody will be going, yep, awesome. Here's one of those little gags. So we had the Nikto miners come in. In case you're wondering what's on the back of the jacket, it looks like they're like a variation, Tatooine's version of the Hell's Angels. And that word there actually says Tatooine. So I think that was kind of groovy. So this is on the back patch. That image there looks like a variation of Yoda when you sit and think about it, but it's obviously an elephant of some sort. And this was on their speeder bike. So, just sort of just chuck that in for good measure. What do you reckon?
I think all of that stuff's really interesting because it sort of adds a bit of depth and extra background to the stories. I do find it more interesting that fans, the first thing they do is pause everything and enlarge it and work out the translation to see if there's anything hidden. And usually it's just jokes from the production team, really, isn't it?
Yeah, well, exactly right. I remember a story from Attack of the Clones when they're saying, "I'll put a restraining bolt, the outline on R2." I think one of the droids, because they knew that the fans would have to invent this entire story as to what happened and why that occurred. So it was just reconfirming that yes, these are the Nikto gang members, the miners. Apparently, I don't know what they're meant to be mining, but there you go, based on the logo that we saw painted on the building in Chapter 1. So so these guys come along and cause a bit of grief, and of course. I like this one. It's Boba Fett in the doorway, and I just couldn't help but think of the Luke Skywalker line, I'm Boba Fett, I'm here to rescue you. What do you reckon of that, old son?
Yeah, I didn't really think of that. There is a lot of really great imagery in this series, and that was one of them when the door opens and he comes in. It actually reminded me, and there's more images later in this episode, of Clint Eastwood's Nameless Man from a lot of his, series movies.
Yep, totally agree. So, so good old Boba Fett's turned up. He's here to kick some ass. And it's just another day on Tatooine. And he comes in where somebody comes in, kicks the shit out of all the bad guys and just walks out. And it's like, and everything just returns back to normal. All you needed was the Cantina band to play some music. What do you reckon?
Yes. Well, the thing is, I don't know everyone who's watched the deleted scenes, but I was incredibly impressed how they had recreated Tosche Station right to the electronic game they were playing. Is from the original movie as well. So it must be a very popular one because usually, when I went and played Pac-Man, the cafe changed it out with something else after about 6 months. But that must be so popular; it's just stayed there for 5 years.
Yeah, very, very cool. I was going to get a still picture of the game as well, but I sort of went past it. You're right. Aren't you a little short for Mandalorian? Absolutely fantastic. So there you go. All right, so that covered off that part of them. As I said, that was a little bit of a side story to the story. I know there's a lot of this going on. So we're just going to go back into the crux of the entire episode, right? And as we predicted last week, yes, Fett is now part of the tribe, and he was going to be trained in hand-to-hand combat with the Gaffy Sticks and the Tusken Raiders. So we sort of predicted that last week and got it correct. We saw a little bit more of their like village style, like they were like, what do you call it? When you're digging up the ground, not like these guys, but with snow plows and shit like that, for whatever reason. But so it's a bit more of the home life of the Sand People, which I thought was interesting. So we sort of predicted this. And one thing that I didn't know, but now that I realise it, it's pretty obvious. So the warrior is actually played by a lady, Joanna Bennett, as you see there. And I was wondering whether the black strands of fabric from her head is meant to represent black hair. So clearly it's intentional to say, yes, she's a female. So what do you reckon?
Maybe. Like you, I wasn't sure last week, and then this week they made it pretty obvious. I was wondering if they were going to do the whole dancing with wolves thing, where you do find out she was another alien that was adopted into the tribe, and she sort of disrobes later and shows, she is a humanoid too, or something like that. Because I don't think we've ever seen what a Tusken Raider looks like underneath all the robes, have we?
No, and a lot of fans are hoping we never do. Keep the mystery. You're right, Michael. There was a joke. I completely missed it. They were combing in the desert because it did actually look just like that. And that's a Spaceballs joke for those. Yeah, exactly right. Very clever. Yes. Well done. You've earned an extra discount at Aaron's store because of that one. So, yes, very, very good. So obviously Fett's been trained by the Tuskens, which is all well and good. We've realised that the warrior is now female. This then brings up into an interesting part of the story, which I thought was kind of groovy. So in the distance, we heard all the noises. Nobody knew what was going on. We were all thinking Krayt dragons, but it's actually a train, a hover train. I go, oh, okay, this is different. And because we've never seen anything like this before. And this thing's really bolting across the desert. And what it is, as we discover later on, it's moving both spice and weapons across the Dune Sea. So when you first saw this, before anything else happened, what did you think of it all?
I thought in a technological society where they have space travel, why do they land on one part of the planet and unload spice to take it across a risky part by train when they should just land it where they want it to be and not have to take it across the Dune Sea full of Tusken Raiders?
Mate, nothing worse than thinking a bit of logic, eh? And they go, yeah, that's just like, no, stick it on a train. You're right. From that perspective, it makes no sense whatsoever. We do have space travel, and this is a big issue that with a lot of Star Wars shows where common sense seems to go out of the window. Why the hell do you need a train? So they're not like they're moving cargo that weighs tens of thousands of tons. It's just freaking containers of spice. So you're right, it doesn't make any sense at all. But so you're going to say something else?
Yeah, well, because it makes for an exciting sequence, and it's also a sequence that's written so Boba Fett can ingratiate himself more into the tribe. And in that previous slide, I think, with him fighting with the gaffy stick, it's interesting. In the first episode, they just gave him an offcut of branch. And in this one, he's got sort of the intermediate thing where it's a much nicer branch, what you won't get splinters off, but it's still obviously not a full gaffy stick. And I did like that little detail that they didn't point out, but they put in the episode anyway.
Yeah, that's a good point, actually. So you're right. He's gone for the, okay, well, you've gone for you passed the children's one. We'll give you the dodgy one, but it's not the real deal just yet. And of course, you see what happens later on. So you're absolutely right. It makes for a good story. It's absolutely wonderful. And there's going to be some awesome references to another movie later on, as we'll show. So, but continuing on from the bar scene, right? So Boba went in there, kicked the shit out of all the Niktos, took all their speeder bikes, brought them back to the to the tribe. And the first thing the Tusken Raiders want to do is tear them apart, which emulates the Jawas, actually. But we saw a similar thing, and you pointed this out to me, that you saw in A New Hope with the Tusken Raiders attacking Luke's land speeder. And I guess maybe they have this real anti-technology sort of mindset where anything that's technical is there to be ripped apart. Whereas the Jawas sell it for scrap, these guys just want to wreck it. So what do you reckon?
Yeah, well, that's what I said. I don't know if it was echoing what was in the original New Hope, but as you said, it was like you saw them like the Jawas just taking everything they could. And I remember this where, Luke's land speeder, the first thing they start ripping stuff off and throwing stuff out of it, obviously cannibalizing it for anything they can use.
Yeah, and I like this one. Now I have a speeder bike, ho, ho, ho. Now, of course, this is all part of the... Was it? Or a ho whoa, well, it's coming up. So that's part of the whole joke, okay? And there's a bit of humor with this episode where, okay, he is now going to try and teach us to Tusken Raiders how to ride a speeder bike. They've never done it in their lives, and of course it's the old gag and it goes backwards instead of going forwards and all sort of bizzo. And there's got to have a montage as they sort of get better and better at it. And in the end, they're all herbing around. I thought this was interesting. He's not even wearing goggles, and of course, on a sandy planet, you're definitely going to need goggles. But it's all part of the gag. They're herbing around. They're the cool kids in town. And I thought, yeah, that's kind of groovy. But unbelievable. There's a bit of predictability here as well. But, yeah, you can clearly see where all this was heading. How did you find all this?
Well, there was a missed line there when he's trying to get the Tusken Raider to jump across and he keeps falling off. He could have turned around and said, oh, come on, even the Ewoks can do this.
Actually, there's a great sequence where the dude falls off the bike and his mate runs over him. You hear the boom, boom, like they obviously made it. They thought of all the jokes they could think of, put them all in, and it works. I mean, it does take. It's turning a serious situation into sort of a bit of silliness, but it's all pretty groovy. So, of course, the idea of the bikes is to attack the train. And the thing I found interesting is that now there's always two ways of looking at something. So when the train is turning up, the dudes come out with their guns, and they're the ones who fire first, right? So I did notice that it was actually the train who fired at the Raiders, and of course the Raiders then shoot back, right? Now, the two ways of looking at this is to say if the train has had to travel across the territory for a lot of tribes, maybe a lot of tribes have opened fire first and these guys are just reacting, or are they like preempting what's to come? Because even as up until this particular episode, the Tusken Raiders have always been shown to be very aggressive. And later on, the leader says that there are different types of tribes. So if the guys on the train think that all Tusken Raiders are brutal savages and that they're going to attack unprovoked, these guys will just fire first as a preemptive thing. So when you look at this, you can go, oh, these guys in the train are arseholes. They're shooting the Tuskens first. But maybe they're doing that because they've experienced this all down the line with other Raiders. So it's guilty by association if you look at it from that perspective. So that's how I interpreted it. What do you reckon?
Yeah, it is one of those things where as viewers as well, we've only ever seen aggressive Tuskens. They've been taking pot shots at pod races, or but they don't kill Luke, do they? They knock him out. They don't kill him, so they're not totally brutal killers. But
Yeah,
they are. Sorry.
go.
Yeah, they are. You know, when I was collecting Star Wars, my brother collected the good guys, and I collected the bad guys, and the Tusken Raiders were the bad guys.
Yeah, they're clearly designed to be the baddies because even like Claire Glars in Attack of the Clones says they walk like men, but they're actual animals. And the thing with Luke, just very, very quickly, you're right. I mean, had the Raider hit him with the other end of the gaffy stick, it would skewered him. So maybe there is a thing that they do actually capture people, as we've seen in the previous episode with the Rhodey and with Boba, for whatever reason. So even though they're trying to say that this tribe is a little bit more benevolent, they're still not 100% from being nasty passy. So there's a big discussion you can have there as to the mindset between the Raiders, but we'll get to that a bit further on. So hang on, there's some comments here. Yes, hang on. I've got to go back.
While you're looking at the comments,
you go.
Just one to throw out there. This was called the Tribes of Tatooine. Were they just talking about the Tusken Raiders? This is for everyone to answer. Who are the Tribes of Tatooine they were talking about? Because I don't know if it was meant to be the distinctions between Tusken tribes, or they're talking about all the different races on Tatooine.
Yeah, I would have taken that as what you said. Like you got the Tuskens, you've got the Hutts, you've got the Trandoshans. That's how I would have interpreted that. It's a very loose thing. So Gavin is talking about the North American Universal One. We're going to get to that later on. Okay, Gavin, so sit tight. Good old last game. I think is Joel watching us. I almost want to start watching it again. That's good. Luckily, there's only 2 episodes. Christy has agreed. Okay, which is good about the whole white man. It's very intentional. Okay, we're going to get to this very, very shortly. It might be the Empire. The age-old argument, who is right, the rebels or the Empire piece? It was the Empire. Yeah, exactly right. So we'll get to that very, very soon. Okay, so because there's a big discussion regarding that. So obviously the train sequence has been emulated from Solo, from Vandar, where there was a train chase there. And some people thought, we don't need another train chase. I mean, you know what's going to happen before it does happen, but it did look really, really good. I've got to give them that. And, of course, you're dealing with savages who are trying to, savages, the Tusken Raiders trying to fighting against technology and the Pike Syndicate who are on board and all the rest of it. This sequence, to be fair, was quite good. Before I move on to the next slide, any thoughts on that at all?
Yeah, I liked the sequence in this better than the one in Solo. And I just think a train sequence works better in a desert. It's more sort of evocative and more has parallels with what would happen in Earth. The one in Solo was good, but it was a bit, the different level train and going around the mountains. I liked this one better. I thought it was a very cool sequence. And are we talking about how this is very similar to
No,
Lawrence
we're not. No, well, just sit tight. We're going to get that in a sec. So we've got a droid driving the train, which I thought was kind of interesting. And he's actually quite capable. He's sort of like pushing buttons and all the million things at once. He's like an FX7 gone nuts. And then, of course, he jumps out of the train and escapes, and no doubt the Jawas will pick him up. I think they did this intentionally because they didn't want the audience to feel sympathetic for this guy if Fett turns up and just shoots and destroys him, which he probably would have done so anyway. So the fact that he got it and ran away, I thought, that's a little bit of something for the kids. What do you reckon?
Yeah, I mentioned this to you. Out of all the Star Wars droids that look like they were kind of come out of the Trade Federation, finally a competent one that can do its job really, really well. You've got R2 as an R2 unit that seems to have, that cut of intelligence above the others, maybe, and a bit more personality. This was another one of those droids that, if you wanted one driving a train, that's the one you wanted on your train.
Yeah, exactly right. Gavin said, no tracks allow for more diverse driving. Yeah, well, that's exactly right. The fact that there was a train, I mean, as we said, it's illogical, but it did actually come across really, really good. And you are right, James. Trains make for greater science fiction because we as humans on this planet can relate to them a lot more. So we can say, it's just like the 426 from Bendigo, it kind of works for us. And with that, you get some beautiful vistas. You get a shitload of banthas and all the rest of it. It's in the desert. It's got the train. And that's where we have to cut into the Lawrence of Arabia sequences. So as someone has said, it's opened up the Book of Arabia. And all these shots and scenes are almost like exact copies of that movie, Lawrence of Arabia. And the thing I found funny, I don't know if you picked up on this, because the train is going so fast, by the time it crashes, it would be miles from where our tribe was located. And there's no way they're going to just run up to it and go, yep, here we are, ready to board the thing. But, hey, it still worked for the show. What do you reckon?
Yeah, I kind of figured they realised it was a fast moving train with all the mirrors and stuff, so they had them positioned down the track. But I can forgive that one. Huffing Billy.
Yeah, yeah. It wouldn't look. It certainly wouldn't work well if the train is crashed and you look back and like the rest of the tribe is like 3 kilometers away and they're like right
I
across the
did love
sand.
how love how they portrayed the speed when someone fell off and hit the ground. They were gone. Yeah, that was great.
Yeah, it was as an action scene compared to the fight scene from the first chapter, which was with the assassins, which was really shit house. This was actually quite good, and it just looked spectacular. And like it was good to see that not all the Tuscans made it. There was a few casualties along the way, and it worked quite well. The key thing is it reintroduced the Pike Syndicate. Now, of course, the thing with the Pike Syndicate is that they were primarily an antagonist group from the Clone Wars. They did actually make an appearance in Solo, which is kind of groovy, but they're another crime syndicate who are effectively not to be trifled with. So even though the train was destroyed and Fett got the spice that was in the train and sent these guys packing, you kind of got to think that at some point these guys are going to be back and they're going to be ready to kick some heads. So, but it was interesting to see that these guys returned. What do you reckon, old son?
What was funny about this, when these turned up in Solo, they were totally alien. They looked totally different. And then when they eventually revealed what they looked like, I did not pick them as being another sort of aquatic race that, looked like the Coral or the Mon Calamari or some of those. And I did think it was interesting when the Tuscans are raiding the train, it looked like one entire carriage was filled with water. And if you're an aquatic race, that's probably what you want on your train, a lot of liquid. And their worry when they were sent away was we're gonna run out of water and we're gonna die.
Yeah. So, I mean, good old Fett, at least he's a benevolent guy. Says, okay, you're going to walk one day, you get back to Anchorhead, you get yourself your little bowls of stuff. He actually said milk, not water. I thought that was interesting. So, like, okay. And sent them packing. So, instead of sitting there, like, that was one deviation from Lawrence of Arabia, the old no prisoners scenario, which I thought, well, that was interesting. It was kind of cool. But I always thought it was just amusing that they're carrying spice and they just crossed the Dune Sea. And as Gavin said, you need some sandworms. I mean, it's almost like, didn't Dune come out a month ago? Jesus Christ.
When they say, what does spice look like? And they go, it looks like that. It looked exactly like the spice out of Dune with the little sparkles in the air and stuff, didn't it? There's a scene where it blows past and it looks like they inhale it, and it's exactly the same scene in the original Dune movie.
Yeah, all you needed was Fett to say, that spice smells a lot like cinnamon, because that's what spice in Dune smells like, and it would have been just absolutely perfect. I like this one. Chrissy said the clothes didn't move in the wind. Okay, yeah, I suppose that's a good point. I mean, realistically, if you're on a train that's going that fast, all your clothes are blowing really hard. Cinematically, it probably would look silly, so they probably had to bend the rules a little bit. But yeah, good observation. Colin said the great Tatooine train robbery. Yeah, that's exactly what it is. James has said Lawrence of Arabia blew up trains and railways, but who up like LFOA, Lawrence of Arabia? Thank God, yeah, he's general exhibition. Yeah, exactly right. So, I mean, the advantage of having aliens that are being like the good guys and the bad guys is that people watching it, little kids don't feel like really freaking out. That's why when stormtroopers die, you don't see a human face. No one really cares about them. So that's one of the advantages of doing a science fiction movie like this, where everybody's covered up and covered over. So, yeah, there you go. Anyway. Now, this is something, right? So we've got a tribe discussion going on here between Fett and the main leader. And he makes a reference to the fact that the oceans have dried. And, of course, the first thing is go, was there oceans on Tatooine? We always thought it was just a desert planet. Who knew? Yeah. Did you pick up on that at all?
I think in old expanded universe in the comics, there was an explanation back in the past where Tatooine was a lush jungle planet and it was totally nuked out of from orbit into the desert that it is now. But that's a really obscure one.
Yeah, even I know that that's not what was supposed to have happened. So the two sons, because the Jawas apparently told you had this tale that the two sons, and they're called what? Just quickly.
I don't know on that one.
Okay, Tattoo 1 and Tattoo 2, they evaporated all the water, right? But the fact that there were oceans at all, I thought, okay, that's something out of left field. Didn't see that one coming. So, yeah, particularly groovy. So, and this is where we also learned that not all the Tuscan tribes are the same. And this leader says that his has remained hidden, as you can see in the subtitles, but other tribes have been very, very aggressive. And I guess they're the tribes that we're used to seeing in the movies, like an Attack of the Clones and A New Hope and all the rest of it. So it's interesting that these guys say they've stayed hidden, yet they're in the open desert. So I don't know how you would actually hide away. But if there are differences of groups, then that actually makes a lot of sense, because that means there's a bit of diversity within the gene makeup, if you will. And they're not all just by default angry bastards. So in Attack of the Clones, when Clee Glass says that they walk like men, but they're all animals, he's obviously referring to the more aggressive group, which is what we see later on when Shmi gets captured. Whereas these guys obviously stay hidden away, as I've said, and a bit more passive, even though if they do capture somebody, they still hang on to them and to a degree mistreat them. What do you reckon?
Yeah, they're the more noble savage group. It's lucky that those ones were the ones that Boba Fett found and not one of the ones that'll rip your spinal cord out like the Predator.
Yeah, exactly right. So this then brings in a really interesting point of the entire episode, right? So it sounds like that Boba Fett is trying to reunite all the Tuskens because the Tuskens are now saying that the off-worlders have come in and invaded their land. And as was mentioned earlier, it's exactly the same scenario with the Native American indigenous people and the white colonists and whatever else. They're replicating this almost down to a T. So the Tusken Raiders they're indigenous to Tatooine. They've been living their lives, yada, yada, yada. The off-worlders come in with the trains and the guns and the technology and all the rest of it, and they're invading the land effectively. And you're trying to wonder here, is Fett now going to say, oh, okay, I'm going to get all the Tusken tribes around to unite together to drive the off-worlders back off-world? Or is he just going to let it all go? What do you think? Because there's a fair bit going on in this particular sequence.
Yeah, there is a lot. And from what we've known in, I guess, The Mandalorian, that doesn't happen, or it hasn't happened in that timeline, because when you see the group that helped them get the crate dragon, they're still sort of the nomadic Tuskens that are wary of off-worlders and don't really help them that much. I do wonder when it comes to collecting the tax for crossing the Dune Sea, if one of them now has like a little black cap and he stops the train and he's like, spice tax. Like, how are they going to pay Tuskens? What do they want? Like a water tax or something like that?
That's a completely different tangent to where I was going to with this, right? You're making a joke out of something I'm trying to be quite serious about. So, yeah, I don't know where they're heading with this. But you got to remember, after this series, the only time you see Tatooine again is in Rise of Skywalker at the Lars homestead. So for all we know, the entire Tusken Raider makeup has changed in the 30 years from this episode, 25 years from this episode through to Rise of Skywalker. So it is 30 years roughly. So, yeah, it's intriguing to see where they're going with this. And because you've got to remember, this is in the past. 5 years later is when we're in the present, with the Hutts and Gaza Flip and all those guys. So you do wonder what's going on with this. So
we haven't seen any Tuskens in the future scenes yet, have we? So we don't know. That's why the only one I could think of was in The Mandalorian. So we don't know if it goes anywhere on a grander scale than the ones that are working with Boba Fett at the moment.
Yeah. And the Tuskens we've seen in The Mandalorian are prior to this sequence. No, they're not. It's after this sequence. So
yeah, that's what I was saying.
It's confusing, isn't it? Anyway,
5 years later. So
God, it's enough to do your freaking head in sometimes. So there you go. Gavin said, "Do you know our types of species with a furry first on Tatooine?" No, I don't know. There's probably mentioned somewhere in a book, but as to or a reference on Wikipedia, whether it's canon or not, I don't really know. So anyway, we'll have to watch this space as to what the motivation is to where we're going. Now, last week, Boba Fett says the word mate. This time he says bugger. So we're getting all the Australian euphemisms in this episode, aren't we? Or in this series? What do you reckon?
I was surprised when they said that, because in Australia we say, oh, bugger and all that. Overseas, particularly in America and England, there are some people that still take more offence to that than we do here. So being in a Disney show, I did smirk a bit going, oh, I wonder if anyone will pick up on that.
Yeah, he says, I think I just swallowed the little bugger. And I thought, there you go.
Yeah. So what did you think of the whole lizard sequence?
Weird. I don't know what to make of it, but it was a means to an end. And I did actually made it. I'll show you a bit later on. I made a really, what I thought was quite a funny joke about it. Bizarre. It's very hard to explain as to why they would have the lizard, why it would do what it would. I don't know. I'm the jury's out on that one, so I don't really know. Jawas rejected Tuskens. No, they're a completely different species. Yes, there you go. All right, so he has the lizard go up his bugle, right? And that starts the whole flashback or the dream within the flashback sequence. And this is where the character sort of is justified for changing and turning into what he turns into. And yes. I've got to admit, a lot of people who really like obscure, ambiguous stuff really can delve a lot into this. And there was a lot to take on board. In this particular frame right here, you're showing both the Fett of today and the Fett of old with the armor on, and they've sort of superimposed the two together. And I thought that was actually quite clever. Now, I'll go through this shot by shot, but first off, before we get too far into it, how did you interpret this particular bit?
Well, I first off, when we have the lizard sequence, it's in a lot of movies where you have like the spirit guide, but usually it's a narcotic, and this is actually a brain lizard, which is very Star Wars and different. When you have that shot, it is shimmering backwards and forwards to one and the other, so it's obviously important in both timelines, I think.
Christy made also reference to the word bugger. It was actually Toyota who used the word bugger. It was actually, it did cause a bit of outrage at the time. So it's a very good point, Christy. Well done for spotting that. James has said about science fiction uses the language could be wonderful, but is often derivative. Yes, I would have to agree with that, which is kind of groovy. Yes. So we went from that. So we're showing the past and the present of Fett in his particular dream, as you will, right? And of course, we've got this interesting shot, which I thought was like you can interpret it 50 million different ways, but it's on an ocean. So I interpreted this as being Camino. This is how I interpret it. The big tree is Django. The small tree is Boba Fett, right? That's how I sort of interpreted it. One is fully grown and can't grow any further, whereas the other one is still in the process of growth, learning, understanding, working its place in the world. That's how I interpret it. How did you interpret it?
Well, as I spoke to you, I said I looked at it different because it was called the Tribes of Tatooine. I wondered if the big tree represented the Tuscans and the small tree represented the Jawas, and they're sort of the two indigenous creatures on Tatooine. And because it's one of these, like you said, a bit of a weird and open to interpretation, we just don't know yet. I don't know if it'll ever be explained.
Yeah, exactly right. So once again, we're back in the Sarlacc, and this is a part of his dream. And we're like they're doing the superimposing thing. So the armor is the symbol as I've written there, but whose symbol is it? Is it Django's or Boba's? And I think what they're trying to say is that Boba was trying to replicate what Django was doing, but that wasn't Boba's passion. It wasn't his heart. It wasn't his soul. And hence the reason why he has to escape from his past and become something completely different. Now, as I said, this is open to interpretation. This is just how I sort of saw it, right? But they're clearly trying to say that he doesn't need to be what his father was, which was a bounty hunter. And even though he spent 20 years of his life being a bounty hunter, maybe that wasn't what he was meant to be in the first place. And I know I'm not explaining this correctly, but that's how I sort of interpret it. And I think they're trying to say that he needs to deviate from what he thought he should be to what he's meant to be, and that is not a bounty hunter. What do you reckon?
I kind of think the same thing, and it goes back to my criticism that it's not the Boba Fett we knew from the old one, and I thought they were very clever because now they're showing why he changed. And when you see him in the Sarlacc pit, and it actually flashes back again to him in the armor and him in the Sarlacc pit without his armor on, and you see him struggling in the Sarlacc pit without his armor, and I'm almost thinking it's a representation of sort of birth and rebirth of his character, especially when he breaks the vine. I was like, oh, that's breaking the umbilical. This is a whole representation of rebirth. That's what I was thinking when I was watching it.
Cool. All right, we're still going with this. So this actually was similar to last week, where we saw Boba Fett's young face in the visor in reflection. Now we're seeing a lot more. We're seeing the adult version, and I interpreted this as saying, so once again, does the son need to emulate the father? And the answer is no. So he picked up the Django helmet and said, okay, I now have to sort of keep the legacy going with what Django once did. But then he's coming to question us and saying, well, do I need to do that? And the answer is clearly no. That then leads into this sequence in Camino, where Django is always off on his bounty hunting missions, and obviously leaves Boba alone. So Boba really doesn't have a father figure, even though ironically, genetically, Django and Boba are identical. And I thought this was actually quite good. So once again, he's got no friends. Oh, shit, one way. He's not a family. He's always on his own. And I think that was actually really, really quite representative. So now finally, what happens is that Boba actually does have a family, if you will, with the Tusken Raiders and potentially even friends, whereas even as a child, he never had that. And clearly his father never had it. So I think there's a fair bit to be taken for. I know we're sort of overanalyzing this a little bit, but it was a very, very important scene because this is the reason why, as we said at the start of the show, the character is completely different to how he was originally. So what we saw in the original trilogy to what we're seeing now, it's a completely different thing. And he actually says in the episodes, I'm not a bounty hunter. He doesn't say I'm not a bounty hunter anymore. He just says flatly straight out, I'm not a bounty hunter. And I think this is all part of the reason why he changed. And the fact that put it in this episode and not the first episode was actually a good thing because a lot of people were struggling, like last week, to say, Why is he so different? Just like we discussed. What do you reckon?
Well, I think the filmmakers will be really happy that the imagery they managed to put into this sequence has generated so much interest and chat online. When we look at those things, when you think about it, the last thing that Boba saw of his father was the head, the helmet, and that's why he flashes back to that, because it was obviously traumatic. When you see that other shot you had taken a screen grab of the Slave One away, and you see the reflection, it almost looks like a teardrop coming out of his eye. And I wonder if they did that because it is sad memories of his father that he has when he's leaving him, which could be me just making stuff up, or it could be deliberate imagery. And then, like you said, he's obviously a changed person because he's conflicted with his past and the new future that he's going to have. And like you said, he's lost his family, his only family, which was his father, and now he's gaining a new family with the Tuscans.
Yeah, exactly right. And that brings up that sequence here where you said as Fett, he's about to break the branch, and that signals the whole restarting of who he is. And Gavin has made a mention, it's like Luke in the cave. And you're right, it's all a part of a learning experience, a rebirth experience. And to be frankly honest, I actually think it works really well. I was actually quite impressed, and sort of like I could see where they're going with this. They needed to justify why the character was different. Now, it works in the past section. So with the whole Tusken Raider thing, you get it, right? But does it sort of work with the present section with the huts and the Sanctuary Bar and taking over Jabba's palace? That I think is probably a bit of a. It's going to take a bit more to sort of get used to why the whole crime boss thing. But for where we are currently, it's quite groovy. And Gavin sort of agrees with you, and which is kind of groovy.
Well, so, Gavin brings up something very interesting, because you say, does it work? Does it work? It works in Star Wars because Jedis aren't the only ones that can get information from the Force. And if this lizard has triggered some Force vision with Boba Fett, and that's how the Tuskens connect with the Force in a different way from the Jedis, that really works with what happened with Luke in the cave. But this is Boba Fett's version of tapping into the Force, and, it's through the vision and the tree kind of thing.
Yeah, and I agree with Gavin once again. The way oneself is the path of the truth, and that's what I think has happened. Ultimately, Boba Fett's realised he doesn't have to follow the footsteps of Jango. It wasn't him; it was the dad, and he needs to find his own way. And now that he's realised he's with the Tuskens, instead of saying I want to kill them all like my old self would have, now I'm going to embrace them and their culture and learn more about them. And he's being far more empathetic, which is kind of groovy. So, it was a good sequence, and there's a lot to take from it. A lot of people will be discussing it for ages, as you said. There's no right or wrong; it's all interpretation. But either way, as we said at the start, Boba Fett, as we knew him, is now a completely different dude. So there you go. Well, the look wouldn't be a Jedi. The lizard, he might be Force sensitive, but it was not a Jedi because he hasn't got the brain and been through the Jedi trials. Anyway, after all that, guess what? We're back to the Book of Arabia. So how's that for Emil? And then the bottom, the right-hand corner, that's actually from Lawrence of Arabia. So the only thing I don't know of is how long was Fett away for, because he gets the lizard up the bugle, goes off, finds the tree, and then comes back. And it's like, well, how long was he gone for? Like 4 hours, like 5 days, a week, 2 weeks, month? It's very ambivalent. That's the bit we're not sure of, because he walks off, does the thing, and comes straight back again. And go, they sort of, the passage of time is not very clear. So, yes.
The interesting thing about that, a lot of people have said, oh, that's the shot from Lawrence of Arabia, but I saw it more as Power Rider. And I don't know if you've seen that in Power Rider, where it's off in the distance and he just fades away. Interestingly, they knew he was going to come back with a branch, though. So obviously the lizard takes all the Tuskens to the same place. And since when were there trees on Tatooine?
Yeah, that's what we're going to discuss in a few moments' time. And I couldn't help myself but put in a bit of a gag here with the lizard. It's a new type of COVID PCR test. So even though the lizard's coming out at this point, not going in, but still, what a way to... It's like a SETI eel from Star Trek gone wrong, isn't it, really? So
it really is. Science fiction really loves putting lizards and snakes and bugs in your orifices.
Yeah, exactly right. So, that, by the way, is the little bugger. So there you go. Did the lizards come from Dagobah? Well, you got to ask yourself, how did the Tuskens know about it? I don't know. It's all left completely up in the air. And whether there's a Force connection there, I would argue probably not. But hey, who knows? It could possibly be. And you're right. That brings us to the bit with the tree. Okay, so he's actually dreamt about a tree and comes back with a freaking branch. We go, shit. Are there still trees in Tatooine? How the hell would he find that? That's why I thought he couldn't have just walked around the corner and there's a tree sitting there. I mean, we must have gone for ages, surely. Not so that's the thing. I'd love to know what the deal is. What do you think of that?
Can you imagine the poor Tuscan that comes back out of the desert with a branch that's too curved or too short, and they go, "Nah, get another lizard. You've got to go back and get a different one."
He comes back with a twig. I love this one from Christy regarding the thing up the nose. Makes me cringe about getting a PCR test. They're going to shove a lizard up your bugle. There you go. Yes, right, Gavin. He's branching out. So yes, he comes back with a tree branch and go, okay, there must still be trees on Tatooine. Who knew? And of course, for those who love their Phantom Menace, up here, the Japor snippet actually comes from a tree as well.
Yeah.
So there must be tree branches in there somewhere. So,
well, the thing that him coming back with a tree branch actually says is the vision was partially real. He did go to a tree and he did break a branch off and come back. So although it was maybe he was tripping at the time, there was some reality to it as well.
I'll have a forget. Yeah, throw it to the banther. Yeah, it's like, hey boy. Yeah, yeah, exactly right. You could make a lot of jokes out of that. So we're going back to the good old Book of Arabia, right? And sure enough, how close can that Dress to Impress? Shades of Omar Sharif, same color and everything. How good is that? I mean, it was a good sequence. They dress him up in the robes. It actually almost looked like Jedi robes, if you will. But that's almost like, they even got the bandolier thing going across here, which is what Omar Sharif's character has there. So they're really pushing the Lawrence Arabia sort of imagery. What do you reckon?
Well, I really like it, and I know there's probably a camp of people who go, "Oh no, you can't do that. You know, it's taking too much imagery from other things." But George Lucas has always done that for all the movies, and the people who make these are movie fans and put things in like this for other movie fans. And if you're going to steal stuff, you might as well steal from the classics, right?
Yeah, steal from the best. Totally agree with you on that one. So there you go. And this is interesting. Now, I don't know if you picked up on this, right? So the Tuscan child, the one who originally had him as a captive and all the rest of it, holds his hand as he leads him away. And I'm now thinking that the Tuscan child is an orphan and is effectively going to become the surrogate son to Fett, because even Fett talks to this kid on a couple of occasions. And I reckon this is going to build up into something interesting. So did you interpret that the same way as I did?
I did. I think they're building up. There's definitely a bigger connection between those two characters than any of the other Tuscans in the camp.
And of course, I've just realised I just like right then. So as Boba Fett really didn't have a lot of connection with Jango, his father, he can now be a better father to the kid because the ages are roughly similar to a large degree. Yeah. So you probably find it's how to break history to say, well, I won't emulate what was done to me. I'll be completely different. And if he shows a lot more affection to the kid as a son, even though he doesn't even know what he looks like, that means that he's actually learned to be a better person as opposed to how he was treated from Jango. That's how I sort of interpret it. As I said, I'm not explaining it correctly, but I know what I'm trying to say. What do you reckon?
Yeah. Well, right from the start, I mean, in the last episode, he could have cracked the kid in the head. He could have got away from the kid. He strangled that big creature in the sand. He could have easily got away if he'd wanted to. So he was obviously assessing the situation, seeing what he was going to do. And we're just seeing he probably, I mean, you're in the middle of the desert, but it's the closest family unit he's ever had.
Yep, totally agree. Sorry, Grant. Daniel Logan's an adult now, so you'd have to shrink him down pretty small to put him in the kid's outfit. So he's like in his 20s or something now, or maybe even older than that. So there you go. And Gavin said he's waiting for a Ben-Hur sequence. Well, you never know. So, as you said, we've done Lawrence of Arabia, and I guess you could say we've done Easy Rider with the speeder. So you never know what's coming up next.
There is some contractual thing in the Star Wars universe. If there is anyone of a diminutive stature, it has to be played by Warwick Davies.
Yeah, exactly right. So there you go. Very, very, very cool. Now, this is something that drove the fan base completely off the charts. So earlier on, we had Toshi Station, we had Cammy, we had Fixer, and all the rest of it. It had to do with the Tusken Rays. Of course, it was when they were let off to build his gaffy stick. And, of course, that's directly emulating, the set was directly emulating the Ralph McQuarrie image from probably 1976, which a lot of people absolutely went nuts over. Yes. You picked this up, didn't you?
Including me. And it's one of the things that makes me look stupid at home, where this image comes up and I go, oh my goodness, and my wife's like, what's happening? I go, well, that's the original production design that came out for a start. And she's like, oh, okay. But I really love it when they do that. It really just shows that the Star Wars universe is as relevant when it was originally made in 77 as it is now.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And that's why it helps with the people who are making these products really know their stuff and know how to provide enough fan service to not overdo it, but to get fans to say that is just really, really cool and really groovy. And if you don't get it, it doesn't really matter. There you go. Christy said, look, that she didn't even know. Yep, she'd seen it somewhere before, and you're absolutely correct. So, yeah. You want to say something? No. All right. So, as we discussed in the last episode, when Fett has his gaffy stick, and we thought originally from the Mandalorian he stole it. He's not. He's earned it. He's going to be given it. Now we realise he's got to make it himself. As a gag, as someone pointed out, he's still using Phillips head screwdrivers in the Star Wars universe, and he gets to make his own gaffy stick. And the key thing is, this is emulating what the Jedi have to do in making their own lightsabers. And of course, he has to make his own stick as well. So instead of earning it, he actually physically had to build it out of the branch that he found, the tree branch. And that whole sequence was really, really good, really good. Oh, that's bad English. I'm just repeating myself. It was great.
It was really good. And the thing is, you saw the Tusken Raiders were there to guide him, but he did it himself. And also he did this not when he's on his trip. He comes off his trip and then he comes back with the stick and makes the gaffy stick to become part of the tribe. So I thought it was a great piece of symbolism and a good way to tie up the spiritual and the physical world.
Yeah, totally get it. Yeah, exactly right. And then that brings us to the last sequence of the movie, which some people have called Dancing with Tuscans. And I guess this is significant because there's been a lot of movies in the past where an outsider integrates themselves into an indigenous group, tribe, if you will, and they become part of that entire tribe. And of course, that's what's happening here with Fett and the Tusken Raiders. And of course, we're now seeing a side to the Tusken Raiders, at least this tribe, that we haven't seen prior. And that will obviously bring up a lot more empathy towards them, a lot more sympathy. And then, of course, it prompts the question, well, where do we go to from here? So this was actually quite a groovy sequence. So he's had his gaffy stick created. He's with the group, and he's effectively become one of them. So he's an outsider, but he's not an outsider anymore. And how'd you find all that?
Well, it proves that the Tusken rain dance doesn't work.
Is that the best you can come up with?
No, I thought it was good as well. I did think the same thing. It's very, very lots of parallels with American Indians and with Dances with Wolves again, which I think I mentioned a couple of times before already. But I like that. I don't mind that. It just gives a lot of it gives a lot of implied background to the story that we're seeing that you can fill in because we've already sort of got the themes in other movies that we've already watched.
Indeed. James has said the first Star Wars was derivative, seemed fresh and new with great sense of wonder. It must be harder with new stuff. Absolutely. I guess all you can do is get older ideas and then just put a new spin on them that you didn't know previously. Because as I said, there's always two points of view regarding these things. And up until this series, the points of view of the Tusken Raiders has always been their mindless, like animalistic beasts. Now we're, suddenly discovering that's not necessarily the case with all of them at all. And they've got a completely different perspective. And it's actually very, very clever that they should do that and go, well, okay, yeah, let's see a side that we haven't seen before. And of course, we, the audience, get to see it. Nobody else gets to see it. So as far as the west of Tatooine is concerned, they're still mindless animals and aggressive and yada, yada, yada. So you do wonder what the future will be for this particular tribe. And if you're going to take a guess, I would say at some point they're either going to thrive or they're all going to get knocked off. And it'll be very interesting to see how it all progresses. So what do you think, old son?
Well, I was actually thinking the same thing when I was watching this, going, oh, maybe this isn't going to end up well for this tribe, and it's only going to be the young boy that that Boba Fett sort of befriended that's going to get out of this series. Just because of what happens with the whole encroachment, they've gone and taken on the crime lords with the train now, so you don't know how that will go, if they will pay a tax or they'll just come back and bomb them off the planet.
Yeah, that's a very good point. The Pike Syndicate could come back with all guns blazing and it might not end well. What's interesting is that from after last week, and I was one of these people who thought that the flashback stuff was sort of a bit okay, but not as exciting as the present stuff. Now it's gone completely the other way around. People are saying, oh, the whole Tusken Raider thing is really, really groovy. They want to see more of it. And the present story is actually kind of weak in comparison. Ironically, hang on just quickly, because of their two separate stories, you can actually make two completely separate TV shows out of them if you want. So when the whole series is done, you could stitch all the Tusken stuff together, and there's one entire series there. And then you got the Book of Boba Fett 5 years later, which is all the present stuff. And I reckon that's actually really, because they're not interacting with each other, the two timelines. So what, you about to say something?
Yeah, I'm sure they will converge for some big plot point down the track. I do think it's a case of last week maybe the new series stuff was written better, and this week the flashbacks was written better. I do wonder if they need to put a bit more emphasis on the story of what's happening in the present day, because it really hasn't advanced very much in the two episodes that we've seen.
No, exactly right. And just before we sort of just finish, going to see the Belly Star Wars Late Show, you're looking at a new fact file. But yeah, no, that's called the Wikipedia Internet. So in terms of ratings, I know we're not putting on the screen. So how did you rate this particular episode, Mr. Aaron?
I rated it pretty highly. I thought it was a good, entertaining piece of Star Wars on the Disney Channel, probably about an 8 out of 10.
Yeah, I was in the same boat because I watched it again. I do find all these shows work better the second viewing around because the first time you're just trying to absorb it all and you go, oh, what do I like, what do I not like? Then when you watch it like the next day and you go, you know what, I can just put it all that aside and just take it at face value. And you do find you pick things up the second time, especially being a bit of a nerd. You're looking at all the corners of the screen and whatever else. I was thinking it was pushing the 9 as well, but I agree. I reckon 8 out of 10. It was actually really well done, actually. There's only a few bits that are kind of like, okay. And as Christy said, wasn't yawning as much this week. And I tend to agree with this. So it's heading in a really good direction. Very, very interesting. And I think it's piqued enough interest for people to say, yeah, we're curious to see where this is going to head. Yeah, what do you reckon?
There is enough stuff hidden in the backgrounds and in the dialogue and things. When you watch a second viewing, it does make it worthwhile. The wart or whatever that creature is that came out of the sand that was from the Jabba's sequence outside the palace, and they introduced a new creature. Boba Fett says, "Sweating like a something on Mustafa," and just lines like yeah, stuff like that. I just think is cool. You know, they don't have to put it in, and they do. So.
Yeah, exactly right. So there you go. Yeah, otherwise, a very, very good episode. And it's turning out to be quite an interesting and intriguing series. A little bit more thought-provoking and in-depth than, say, Mandalorian was, which was unbelievably superficial. So if you're a bit hardcore Star Wars fans, I don't know if the general public are getting it. I'd be surprised if they are. They might be going, yeah, it's kind of losing me. But if it's aimed at the Star Wars fan base audience, then I think it's actually doing quite well. Providing you can get over the hump in the road, which is the fact that Fett is now a completely different character to how he once was. The rebirth is actually a bit of a big deal. So there you go. What do you reckon, Mr. Aaron, before we sign off for tonight?
I do think if you have been brought into Star Wars through The Mandalorian, this is going to be a good show. You know, it's more of the same kind of thing. Mandalorian maybe had a little more general appeal, we said, with Grogu, but this is going to, get people through the gap to the next series of that, if that was what their thing was.
Very, very good. And with that in mind, we're going to buzz off now. So hopefully you enjoyed our natters about good old Chapter 2, the Tribes of Tatooine, which is all very, very groovy. We'll leave you all to it. We'll see you next Monday for Chapter 3. Should be very, very exciting. What do you reckon? Leave you to it, Mr. Aaron.
I will see you guys next Monday. And everyone else, remember to tune in to Dags talking about what are you doing this week?
I'm talking about sci-fi movies of the 80s. So there you go. How good is that? Oh, very, very cool. All right, we'll leave you to it. Party hard and rock on. Okay, bye-bye.
Good night.